Hey, my friends, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Hope things are going well in your world. Thanks for hanging out with me. We are inching our way through the book of Matthew every weekday morning in 10-ish minute chunks. And some of you have been with me since the beginning, which is a lot of time that we spent together. And some of you are brand new here and you just jumped in yesterday or today, and you are hyper welcome. Thank you for being here. Now, when you encounter a story that you love, like picture the big legends and myths and stories of our era, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, the Matrix trilogy. People kind of liked that for a while, but didn't hold up. The Marvel Cinematic Universe. A lot of you like Harry Potter. I mean, whatever that childlike, wonder-inducing story that has metaphor and theme and morality to it. Think about how you've consumed that. You probably didn't just watch it once. You go back and you watch it again, and you watch whatever the second Harry Potter is in light of whatever the second half of the seventh Harry Potter is, and you're like, dang, I get it now. I see how that fits together, and I learned things about Harry's character and who he is and what his weaknesses are. That's amazing. Look, the goal of this thing is for us to have this document in our hip pocket when we are done. Not to have done a quick survey, not to have picked up a few pointers about Matthew, but to strip away all the noise, all the other stuff, and for you and me, your brain and my brain, to grind through this thing in a fun, meaningful way where we come away being like, all right, that is one book out of the most important document in the history of ever that I have carefully and rightly considered. I've wrung everything out of it that I could. And I got maybe not the other 65 books in my hip pocket, but I got that one down pretty dang well. In the spirit of that, let's just talk about how we got to the place that we are. So here we are at the beginning of Matthew chapter 12. We've had these two grand Sabbath controversies, one about eating grain on the Sabbath day, the other about healing on the Sabbath day. And people are pretty freaked out about this young man who's out there on the hillside teaching these new ways. And we've just got this account here of his hand healing on the seventh day and his love wearing no disguise. Some people look at this and they're like, death to the radical. He is way out of line. Others look at this and they say, praise be the miracle. God sends a blessed sign for troubled times. And here is how we got to this very divided place in the Gospel of Matthew, where you got a group of people who see it one way, a group of people who see it the other way, and Jesus, nose down, pointed straight ahead in this whole kingdom thing that he is working on doing. So you go back to Matthew chapter 1, and it opens with a great big genealogy. Every single name in this genealogy of Jesus matters. When you're a kid and you read this for the first time, you totally skim through it, and you're like, some people the knew other people, and then they had babies, and it's great, and then but skip to you got David, and then Jesus, good enough. But as we found looking through this, there are difficulties that had to be overcome in a lineage of Jesus. Matthew addresses those by the way he weaves through the story of Jesus' genealogy, and all those names do have a story attached. And the story is the sum of everything that was in the back of everybody's mind, everything that was the grand meta-narrative, the explanation for everything is summed up in those list of names. To you and me, a couple of them pop. To the original audience, all those names popped. And all of those names are pregnant with anticipation of this one who is promised, this one who is supposed to come to flatten everything out, make everything right, and fix the broken stuff about people and redeem and initiate this eternal kingdom and reign on the throne of David forever, and reign perfectly and beautifully and redemptively. And so Matthew chapter 1 sets all of that stuff up. It points to the awesomeness of Mary, the faithfulness of Joseph, the uniqueness of the birth of Jesus. Then we get a little bit about the Christmas story in Matthew chapter 2. Here is the part where we get the majority of, well, pretty much everything we know about the story of the Magi, the three kings, and Herod wanting to kill all the babies and trying to trick the Magi, but all of these dreams come into play with Mary and Joseph and the Magi, and providentially, Matthew is developing the theme that God is preserving this vulnerable little baby who turns out is actually God in the flesh himself. And he's doing so through providential, miraculous means. And then they go on this journey to Egypt, and ultimately Herod's plans are thwarted, and he dies, and then the kid returns to Nazareth, and that is where he grows up in chapter 3. And John the Baptist is the central figure in this religious revival that's occurring, and apparently all of it is meant to point to Jesus. And already there's friction here between the religious leaders, the religious establishment, and John the Baptist, and by the transitive property also for Jesus. But then Jesus gets baptized and the whole Trinity shows up at the baptism. There's a strong affirmation of who Jesus is, but we go from this high point to chapter 4 and this low point. And still, Jesus is not really a public figure at this point. And he goes out and he is tempted in the desert. He passes a test nobody has ever passed in all of history. The test of the ring of power, of sin, of darkness. Everybody else succumbs to it and is beaten by it and is in need of deliverance. But Jesus, symbolically and literally, before he gets into his redemptive public ministry, he beats something everybody else lost to, and that is a very important theme moving forward. He picks some disciples, he does some early miraculous stuff, enough to generate a whole bunch of questions that in chapter 5 begin to be answered. And chapter 5 is the first big public speech of Jesus. The book of Matthew is built around 5 of these speeches. This is the most prominent. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. It opens with the values of the kingdom, and it's a description of an entirely different world, a different mindset, a different set of values. And right now, this kingdom might seem abstract, but Jesus seems to be intoning that it's more real than the world you live in, and the values of the thing are beautiful. They're the stuff that everybody wants. It just seems far-fetched to imagine that such a thing might exist. But the more Jesus talks, the more his credibility comes through, and people start to think, well, maybe it could exist. And the Sermon on the Mount ends at the end of Matthew 7 saying, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. So everybody wants to know, can Jesus back it up? Well, and that's what we get in chapters 8 and 9, a whole bunch of miracles that demonstrate Jesus' not just power, not like magic tricks or mutant abilities, but authority over everything that limits humanity. Whatever you can think of that limits us, time, distance, death, age, nature, disease, whatever you're picturing, any and all of those, Matthew selects from probably a whole collection of miracles he could have picked from and puts in order a series of miracles that demonstrates that Jesus has authority over all of that stuff, meaning that he didn't just come off as a good orator who could spin an impressive sales pitch for this kingdom religious idea. No, he looks like he could back it up, and maybe all those beautiful things that everybody wishes might happen could actually be real. Well, we get to chapter 10, and Jesus takes his inner circle of disciples, and he's like, all right, now you guys are going to go out and do this stuff too. And so he sends them out to do miraculous things. We get the list of who the disciples are, the super famous ones that you've all heard of, and he gives them what's called the Lesser Commission, telling them that I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves, therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. And he tells them, like, you're going to get beat up, this isn't going to go well, but he gives them this vague promise that the Spirit of your Father will somehow be speaking through you. And so they go out, and apparently they do the thing. And so in this missional discourse of chapter 10, the second great big speech that Matthew is structured around, Jesus talks about the immediate open world quest the disciples are about to go on for a few weeks or months or whatever it was in their local regional area. He talks about the medium quest, which is what's going to happen with them over the course of their lifetimes following him. And then he talks about the great big picture, the trajectory of all of this kingdom Christian stuff moving forward and what that is going to look like. In chapter 11, we start to see pushback and ratcheting tension. John the Baptist, who clearly likes Jesus, is in jail. Maybe his compass is spinning. Maybe it was just his followers whose compasses were spinning. But whatever the case, he sends them to Jesus to be like, hey, are you like actually the Messiah or whatever? And Jesus is like, people not blind anymore? Just like people coming back to life and the deaf are hearing things again, like the leprosy going away? Okay, then yeah, that's what the Scriptures said was supposed to happen when the Messiah came. So yeah, I'm it. And then he flips around and he defends John the Baptist, saying he's pretty special and unique. Then Jesus offers some very critical remarks about the generation that he is speaking to at that particular moment. And then he offers these very sympathetic remarks at the end of chapter 11, saying, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He goes right off of that restful Sabbath promise and invitation to this broken generation, this broken world, and is immediately met by people who want to nitpick about a day ordained for rest, and in doing so, make that restful day very not restful. And that tension between the religious establishment and Jesus, as well as the people whose eyes God has opened so that they can see what's going on with this, that leads us to a place where now at the middle point of the chapter, or pretty close to it, the Pharisees have seen enough, and they walk away from this most recent Sabbath controversy where Jesus heals a guy's busted up hand, and they're like, we got to kill Jesus. And that is where we're going to pick it up tomorrow, moving forward, starting in Matthew 12 and verse 15. That's a lot of Bible, but if you've been hanging out with me, think about how much of that was like, yeah, I got it. That's awesome. I'm tracking with this. Think about how many of those pieces moving forward you've got now that we didn't have a year ago. And I do mean we. So I'm really excited about that. Thanks for doing this with me. I'm pumped to build on top of the foundation we've already got put down and move forward with this thing. Thanks, friends. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.